Hello students, welcome to the workshop for Writing with Examples. Let's get started. Before we begin, I want to review the goals of the workshop. So in this workshop, you'll be able to define the term example as it's used in writing. You'll review common features of examples, and we'll provide a paragraph that you can look at so you can see how writers use examples in their essays. And then by the end of the workshop, you'll have instructions to help you create your own paragraph that is supported by examples. So with that in mind, make sure you have a pen and some paper by your side and about 30 minutes of uninterrupted time. Okay, let's begin. So for our purposes, we're going to define examples as what you see on the screen here. So for writing, examples are short, specific instances that illustrate or clarify a point that you want to make as a writer. Examples have these common features. They use specific naming or sensory details. They use concrete language that answers this question: who is doing what exactly? And they are a bit longer and more interesting than vague generalizations. So notice the difference between a vague and specific example. So a vague generalization, my mother is so kind to others. That might be an example of one reason why I love my mom so much. But a much more specific example that's much more interesting is this one. Every Thursday, my 82-year-old mother takes her blind friend Bethany to the Amesbury Public Library so that Bethany can get the latest books on tape. So you can see how the specific example, I think, is much more interesting and compelling and reveals a lot more about my mother than the first vague generalization that just simply said she's kind. So the vague generalization tells you something, and the specific example shows you something. So this is what you're going for in this workshop. You want to work towards creating specific examples that really help the reader understand the point you're making. So pause the screen and read over the information here until you feel like you understand it well enough to proceed with the workshop, and then come on back. Okay, so the point about being specific cannot be overstated. So I just want to give you a few more examples. Basically, when you're creating a specific example, you're answering this question: who is doing what? Right? As specifically as you can, you want your examples to show who is doing what. So I'm going to give you some examples here. Here's a vague example. One of the reasons why my boyfriend makes me mad is because he's a slob. My boyfriend is a slob. That's a vague example. But look how you can make it more specific by using naming details that help us really see and understand why he's a slob. So, my boyfriend Ron leaves his dirty socks on the floor, drinks milk from the carton, and the other day I found moldy pizza crusts and apple cores underneath our couch. So, you can't argue. The second, more specific example of why Ron is a slob is much more compelling than the vague one. So let's do another one. Vague, I always rely on my mother. Here's a more specific way to express that idea using example. So when I lost my driver's license for a month, my mother gave me rides to work, no questions asked. After I lost 40 pounds, my mother took me to buy a new dress at Talbot's. And when I suffered from my second miscarriage, my mother held me in her arms until I fell asleep. So those much more specific examples really show important times when this writer relied on her mother. So the specific example is much more compelling, I think, than the vague one. Let's look at one more example. So here's a vague statement. Winters are so bad in New England. Here's something that's a sentence that's much more specific and provides examples to really show you how winters are bad in New England. So 48 inches of snow fell in the month of February. Hundreds of people lost electricity when ice weighed down power lines, and traffic on 495 was backed up for 6 hours due to poor visibility. You have to admit that the more specific sentence shows you why winters are so bad in New England. So pause on this page for a moment and really look at the differences between the vague examples and the specific examples. And keep in mind that this workshop is going to help you write specific examples because they're much more interesting and compelling for your readers. When you're ready, come on back to the workshop. Okay, so you've looked at individual examples. I want to show you what they look like when a writer uses examples inside of a paragraph. So this is a paragraph that I wrote for an essay that I wrote on my family's slumber party traditions. So this is a small paragraph that was inside a larger essay about why my family had slumber parties when I was a girl. So keep that in mind. This is one body paragraph in a larger essay. And I've color-coded this paragraph so you can see the different elements of an essay and the different features of using examples in your writing. So as with any paragraph, you want to make sure your readers understand the main focus of the paragraph. I usually begin with a topic sentence to establish the focus of the paragraph. In this case, the point that I'm making is that my mom was a genius for having family slumber parties. Now I'm going to use examples, specific examples, to support that topic sentence. So when our parents didn't have the electric bill and we ate mayonnaise sandwiches for dinner, slumber party. The night before one of my childhood surgeries, a slumber party. Thunderstorms, snowstorms, hurricanes, slumber parties. So you can see by those specific examples that I'm showing you who is doing what, and I'm giving you specific concrete language so you can start to imagine the specific reasons why we had slumber parties when I was growing up. And then my last sentence is my closing sentence, and it's going to reflect on it's going to reflect on the topic sentence and help us better understand why I thought my mom was a genius for having slumber parties. So this last sentence, my mother's instinct to pull us close was a brilliant lesson in gathering family before a storm. So that closing sentence reflects on the topic sentence and helps the reader think more deeply about that topic sentence. So pause on this screen for a moment until you feel you really got a handle on what an example looks like in a paragraph. When you're ready, come on back to the workshop. Okay, so now that you know what an example is and what they look like in a paragraph, it's time for you to try to write one of your own. So before we write a paragraph that uses examples, I'd like you to do some pre-writing. So step one, on a piece of paper, I'd like you to focus on one point you'd like to make that could be supported by specific examples. So think for a moment about a point you'd like to make in a paragraph. So for example, maybe you could write about all the reasons why your roommate drives you crazy, or all the reasons why you love your mom. So choose one point you'd like to make on any topic, and keep in mind you'll be writing a paragraph, so you're not writing an entire essay. So you're just looking for one specific point you'd like to make that could be supported by specific examples. When you have that point, go ahead and start on step two. So I'd like you to fold a piece of paper in half so that you have two columns. Label one column vague examples and the second column specific examples. And I'm going to show you an example of what we're going to do next with this, but let me explain the instructions first and then I'll show you an example. Once you have these two columns on a piece of paper, I'd like you, on the inside of the column for vague examples, do your best to write 5 very vague examples to support your point. And at this point, you're trying to be as vague or as general as possible. Okay? After you have done that, you've come up with your 5 very vague examples. The last piece of the pre-writing activity is to then turn those vague examples into very specific examples. So you want to transform them by adding concrete details that help the readers understand who is doing what exactly. So let me show you an example of what I mean. Here's the column that I made for my slumber party paragraph that you read a few moments ago. So on the left-hand side, you see I have my vague examples of when we had slumber parties. So when I was scared or sad, or when I wanted to have fun and celebrate, when I wanted to connect, when we had no money, and when I want to spend time with my daughter. These are all the vague reasons why I would have a slumber party. Okay? So now notice how I took each one of those vague reasons and then I turned it into a specific example. So when I'm sad or scared, transforms into this specific example. The night before my childhood surgeries, we had slumber parties. Okay? So it's giving you a lot more specific information. When I want to have fun or celebrate, that's one of the reasons why. Now I'm going to give you a very specific example. When my sister made her first communion, she asked for a family slumber party. So pause on this page just for a moment so that you can see how to transform a vague example into a specific example by naming who is doing what and using names and concrete details. So pause on this page for a moment until you feel you have an understanding of what you need to do for your pre-writing. And when you feel ready, go ahead and fill out your own columns with examples from your own experiences that will help you write your paragraph. And after you've done that, come on back to the workshop. Okay, so now that you've done some pre-writing and you understand a bit more about examples and how to create specific examples, I'd like you to try to create a paragraph of your own. So the first thing you want to do is create a topic sentence for your paragraph. So think about the point you want to make in your paragraph. What point will your examples support or prove? So in my case, my example was my mother was a genius for having family slumber parties. Think about what point you want to make and create a topic sentence to express that point. Once you have your topic sentence, then choose as many examples from your pre-writing that you want to use in your paragraph to help us understand that topic sentence in a compelling way. So use your examples from your pre-writing to help you write your supporting sentences, and remember to include enough detail in each of your examples so that your readers understand exactly who is doing what in each example. And remember to use names for people and objects in your examples, because that will help it sound more specific for your readers. After you've done that, you want to end your paragraph with a reflection on why the point you express in your topic sentence or through your examples is significant to you. So your last sentence should help us think more deeply about your topic sentence. Sometimes you have two closing sentences, so pause the screen and use it as a guide as you create your own paragraph that uses examples. Then when you're done creating your paragraph, come on back to the workshop. Okay, you're almost done. So now you're ready to finalize your paragraph. So read your paragraph aloud to see if you've included all the elements of a paragraph. So you want to ask yourself these questions. Do I have a clear topic sentence to establish the focus for the paragraph, the reason why you're sharing all these examples? Do your supporting sentences, your examples in this case, prove or back up your topic sentence? And have you double-checked your examples? Have you provided enough detail so that your readers will understand exactly who is doing what in each example? Did you include a closing sentence or two that helps readers reflect on your topic sentence? And then finally, have you read your paragraph one more time to help you edit for misspellings or unclear sentences? When you've done all those things, congratulate yourself because you've created a paragraph using relevant examples. Well done.